Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Carmen Vitali here with you guys once again on a Thursday to preview every single game in the upcoming NFL slate. It is week 7. We've got all sorts of trends to talk about, Carmen. I know we've talked about, it feels like every 2 weeks we go, okay, now we know what we're looking at. And then 2 weeks later we go, okay, wait, now we know what we're looking at. And then it's 2 weeks after that we go, wait a second, now we know what we're looking at. So we've gone through the ups and downs of what could be for every single team. But I do think the picture is becoming a little bit more clear. Before we dive into it, Carmen, how you doing, my friend?
I'm great. I'm good. I've got my really cozy, oversized Buccaneers sweatshirt. Shout out to the Bucs for sending it to me. Adore it. Comfy, cozy, settling in for a 2-hour show to take you through the entire NFL.
It is hoodie season. 100%. 1000% even. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I woke up this morning and it was like 40-ish degrees, which as a Florida boy, not great. Don't love it. I feel like
are you kidding? As a Chicago girl, I'm like, all I want is for it to be 40 degrees when I wake up.
This is your element. This is your home turf right here. From this point on, throughout the rest of the previews that we do throughout every single week of the season, you're the home team. You're the home team here. You might have to carry me because I don't do well in the cold. I just don't. For most things,
like 65 years, so you can come to LA.
Before we get into it, we have 2 Monday night games, and I can't remember if I asked you this at the beginning. How do you feel about the double header Monday night football games?
Honestly, and this is probably also now like a symptom of being on the West Coast, but like I wish that they would, like, I don't have a problem with them doing a double header. I just wish it was actually a double header. So having to like revert back to like my quad box way of watching football when there's 2 football games going on pretty much simultaneously. I know they stagger them by like a half an hour, but like I wish they would stagger them further so that I can, I don't know. I don't like this current format, but I don't mind a doubleheader.
We have the exact same take. I don't mind the doubleheader. Just like start one of them at 6:30. I don't know. Tell people to get.
You can move one a little bit earlier.
That's what I think. I think that you're right. I think that it should be, I don't know, at least like 7. This was like 8:15 and then 9. So like, all right, well, now we basically just have to choose. And I don't even know if they're on the same network or not. Probably not. So we got logistics to figure out. I love the double football. I don't like how it's set up. Can we do something about this? Hey, can we just make some multi-million-dollar decisions based on my preferences? That would be great, actually, if we could do that. Thank you so much, NFL.
People think like us, though. And at the very least, I don't think people would be mad if you staggered them a little bit more, because I don't really understand why you're cannibalizing your own views by like putting 2 games on simultaneously like that.
We got solutions. If they ever want to hit us up, Carmen Trevor Consulting. That's what it is. That's the LLC. It was just formed last week. You can hit us up. We're very official. Okay, let's get into these games. Let's talk about the Thursday night football games. We will get to the Monday night football games at the end of the show, but we start, as we always do, with Thursday night football here. By the way, we're going to talk about a lot of PFF stats here on this show. If you want to see those for yourself, not just for every team that we talk about here, but specifically your team, you can even dive into more premium stats. Go ahead and get yourself a PFF Plus subscription over at pff.com. That is the best way to do that and follow along with the show. Broncos at Saints. Sean Payton revenge game coming home to a sea of boos. Actually, I don't know. Are they going to cheer him? He won them a Super Bowl.
It might be like a Tom Brady at Gillette Stadium kind of situation where like pregame when Tom came out of the tunnel for the first time, the crowd cheered him and it was like massively, like everybody was standing up in their seats and clapping and whatever. And then once the game started and he was the opposition, then they booed him.
See, okay. All right. I could see that being the case. I wonder if like Sean's sort of like retiring and then sort of coming back and forcing his way out. I wonder if that does make it a little bit different. We will see. Yeah. But that Sean Payton versus the crowd is not my matchup that matters here, but I am very curious as to hear what your matchup that matters here is for Broncos versus Saints. What do you got?
Yeah, well, it has to do with the other with Sean Payton's offense, in fact, and it has to do with Bo Nix, because I need to see him get better, specifically on downfield throws, I think we know that Bo Nix, when it's the pass is 0 to 9 yards, you're good. Those are the high completion percentage throws for anybody. And sure enough, he's 61 of 80 on throws like that, but isn't productive out of that, which he has no touchdowns, no interceptions, 89 rating on throws up to 9 yards. When you get to the 10 and over category, that's where things start to get dicey. They get dicey immediately. 23 of 62, 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions on throws of 10 or more yards for Bo Nix. That is not the way to sustain drives. That is not the way to be productive. That is not the way to get into the end zone when you are throwing more picks than you are touchdowns. I need to see kind of that maturation and the improvement from this Broncos offense that just hasn't been producing in order for them to kind of really complete the cycle. Because I think we've talked about how their defense has been a lot better this season than we a lot of people initially thought. Then you get the game against the Chargers this last week, where I think that the Chargers threw on them a lot more than they anticipated. And now you've got some key injuries in that secondary. I'm worried about this defense being able to contain points even with all of the injuries to New Orleans. So Bo Nix needs to step up.
Yeah, no, I think the Bo Nix is obviously going to be a major talking point in this one. Spencer Rattler also still starting, so it's sort of rookie on rookie here. Spencer got his first start last week, and it was tough, right? I mean, he didn't have the best game, but right out of the gate for you to be down 14-0, I mean, that sucks. You throw your first pass to Chris Olave, it's a fumble, it's picked up on Antoine Winfield Jr. The Bucs had already scored on their first drive, so it's like, oh, okay. My second play, now I'm already down 14-0, and that's really tough in the NFL. So it's just tough for him overall. I think this one will be a little bit more interesting, a little bit more close, but specifically the matchup that matters to me is red zone percentage for both of these teams, because when we talk about their offense overall, and what I wanted to highlight was, I'm not trying to cherry pick here, but the Saints have very clearly been a different offense beyond week 2, because in week 1 they played the Carolina Panthers, looked like world beaters. Week 2 they played the Dallas Cowboys, looked like world beaters. Now we kind of see those defenses aren't exactly great. They're kind of bottom 5 defenses in the NFL in a lot of different categories. So from week 3 on, the New Orleans Saints are just 27th in the NFL in EPA per play. And when you look at the Broncos, they're only one spot higher in that time. They're 26th. So these are two of the lower EPA per play, lower efficient offenses in the NFL. However, when it comes to red zone percentage, since week 3, the Broncos are 4th in the NFL. They have an 85% touchdown conversion red zone percentage. So when they get in the red zone, they are scoring touchdowns. The Saints, since week 3, they're 12th in the NFL. So where these offenses aren't great from beginning kick to final kneel down or whatever the final play is, when they get into the red zone, they are pretty efficient here. So I think, in my opinion, the red zone chances, opportunities might be low in total volume number, but whoever capitalizes the most on that is going to mean a lot. And right now, the Broncos are the team that really seem to have things figured out in the red zone. So I lean Broncos in this game simply because if it's two struggling offenses, they're the ones that right now know how to get it done.
Yeah. And I think it's a good call out too, just to say the volume isn't quite there because the overall trips inside the red zone, we haven't been able to see that as much with this Broncos offense, given that they aren't sustaining these drives and even getting into those situations. But when they do, it works. Plus factor, though, is going to go the other side of this. And with all of the injuries, I mean, the Saints are now without Taysom Hill, Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave. They have multiple injuries along the offensive line. Still don't have Eric McCoy, and I'm going to keep calling that out until they do because it matters. This offense is one singular person, and it's Alvin Kamara. So how effective can Alvin Kamara be running behind a line that has a ton of injuries with no other threats really on the field? And, oh, by the way, a rookie quarterback. This is Alvin Kamara's game. He's been extraordinarily productive. He looks like the Alvin Kamara that we were so scared of when I worked for the Buccaneers 3-4 years ago. And it was just a complete game wrecker. I mean, he has the 7th most rushing yards on top of having 238 receiving yards. He's got a league leading 132 touches. You literally cannot run him more than you already are, but you're going to have to in this game if the Saints want to put points on the board, because you just, with the injuries and how bad this Saints team has been bitten by the injury bug, he's basically your only hope at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I wrote down as my plus factor, it has to be Alvin Kamara in this game. And really, I think the team that runs the ball better is going to feel a lot better about their chances to win the game because the Broncos, they also have really struggled to run the ball over the last couple of weeks. Javonte Williams has been a disappointment for them. And when Alvin Kamara can get it going, it's a very well-balanced Saints attack. So no, you mentioned no Chris Olave, no Rashid Shaheed. You've got to be able to lean on Kamara. And that's really unfair because I feel like the Broncos, their defensive line, one, is really good. And you're going up against a hurt Saints interior offensive line. So it's hard to expect a lot of production from Alvin Kamara in this game. But I think the label of him being the plus factor is appropriate because if he can overcome what has been a struggling, beat up offensive line for the New Orleans Saints and Denver probably stacking the box against them, then that really swings things, in my opinion, in New Orleans' favor. So I agree with you there. I think that is a plus factor that you have to watch out for and the biggest one that we have in this game. Let's fast forward to Sunday, early morning, 9:30 a.m. kick. Once again, we have 3 straight weeks of a London game here. And for the third and final chapter of it here this season, it is Patriots versus Jaguars. Now, the Jags, not a good showing last week playing in London against the Chicago Bears. It was the Chicago Bears' best offensive outing, or certainly Caleb Williams' best offensive outing of the season. The Jags are reeling now. This is a team that is currently slated to have a top 5 pick in next year's draft because of their 1-5 start. And even if you want to look at this Jags team and say, I think they're more talented than their record, they are running out of time to get out of the hole that they are digging themselves. So sitting at 1-5, taking on a New England Patriots team that is also reeling and currently in possession of what would be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. What is your matchup that matters here, Carmen?
Me against my alarm clock again? No. I'm so tired of getting up at 5:30 in the morning to watch football.
How do I slam the alarm clock no matter how much they're favored by in this game?
No, right? No, please take the alarm clock. That's like the easiest. God,
wait,
so bad.
hold on. Now I have to ask you. For your alarm clock, I'm assuming it's not like an actual alarm clock and it's your phone because, it's 2024. Yeah. Are you somebody who has, like 20 different, or is it like 1 or just 2 or whatever? What's your alarm schedule like?
No, I'm the 1 or 2 person.
Okay. All right.
So I like and also I have the most annoying, like very standard Apple alarm clock, and like it just makes me like grit my teeth, but like I need that because that's what's gonna like jar me awake, and that's what's going to make me get up, is to like I do have it like on my bedside table, so I have to like kind of reach over and like very purposely turn it off. I can't just like roll over and go and then that's it. Mm-hmm. So that's the way that I combat it. I'm not one of like the 10 alarm clock people. No.
The only reason why I bring that up is because I think Dan Lanning, the head coach of the Oregon Ducks, showed his phone and he had 15, and it's like every 4 minutes starting
every 4 minutes, just
4:30 a.m., 4:30, 4:34, 4:38, 4:42. Like it's just I am also like a 2 or 3, which is bad sometimes because I'll hit snooze or I'll just turn it off. I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm up. Let me turn it off. Let me just rest my eyes really quick. Boom, now you're screwed. So maybe we're not as efficient as we need to be. Maybe our PFF grades for getting up aren't as good as they need to be.
Being on the West Coast again, it really as soon as you wake up, I always check social media. That's the first thing I do. I know it's not healthy, but that's what I do. And you realize instantaneously that the rest of the world has been up for 2 to 3 hours already. And you're just you feel so behind, and that anxiety gets to me. And I'm like, I need to get up. I need to do something. I need to catch up on whatever's happening.
That's good.
Or whatever. So
yes.
It's a lot easier actually to wake up when you're on the West Coast because you're already so behind the 8 ball.
FOMO is your alarm.
I've had FOMO. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So actually getting back to football, what is the matchup that matters that you had in this game?
You got to go strength on strength here for me, and it's Brian Thomas Jr. versus Christian Gonzalez because those are the bright spots of both of their respective units. BTJ has done beautifully, especially, just really assuming that outside role, that number 1 wide receiver role for the Jaguars. He's 9th in receiving yards. He's got 168 yards after the catch, which ranks 11th in the league. And then you've got Christian Gonzalez, who is this bright spot on a New England Patriots defense that obviously isn't there yet. This whole team's not there yet. But Christian Gonzalez is great. Like he's doing well for what you need him to be. 44 targets, 26 catches allowed on those 44 targets, 2 touchdowns, and has an interception, 4 forced incompletions. So who wins that battle? Because I really do think that for the Jags to get things going offensively, it's going to run on the back of BTJ. And then if the Patriots can shut him down and Christian Gonzalez is their best chance at that, then this is the matchup that essentially is going to dictate how each team does and which team ultimately comes out on the winning side of this. And I, quite frankly, am very worried for Doug Peterson's job if the Jaguars lose this.
So I also agree. I think it's a huge matchup. I mean, my plus factor in this one can be something as easy as, hey, basically anybody else other than Brian Thomas Jr. Because I do agree with you. Like that is a huge matchup that matters because Christian Gonzalez has stood up well against basically all the wide receivers that he has gone up against. So you figure he's probably going to go up against the guy that is the linchpin of their passing attack there for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think that if he is taken away, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, like we saw Evan Ingram get involved. Like it's got to be a passing option that is not Brian Thomas Jr. I think that is a big plus factor in me for the Jags to be victorious in this one. Mm-hmm. But specifically for a matchup that matters, I'm looking at a Jaguars group that since week 4, 51.5 coverage grade overall. They're averaging one of the highest EPA per plays allowed in coverage over those 3 weeks. And not having Tyson Campbell out there with him on IR has been brutal for them. And, Andre Cisco, after the game last week, was really frustrated. He basically comes out and he says, hey, like there's a lot of quit on this team, unfortunately. We don't know where guys are going to be because they're not running as fast as they should be. We don't have that chemistry. Cisco had the interception last week, so he had an elite 90.4 coverage grade, but I don't think there was a single other coverage player on Jacksonville who had a coverage grade above, I'll be conservative and say 65, but it might have been 60. I can't remember off the top of my head, but to me, that is a matchup that matters because it's going to be a lot better than what it is for Jacksonville. Certainly, we could talk about how bad New England's offensive line has been and how Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen can have a big day against Drake May, who did struggle versus pressure last week. But May's going to let it fly, I think. And if you are a coverage team that is not on your P's and Q's, even a new rookie quarterback can really hurt you. Guys like Jalen Polk, guys like Pop Douglas, like they have receivers on this team. It's just a matter of, can you cover them the way that you need to really rattle Drake May and create those very, very small throwing windows to where maybe he doesn't think these guys are open yet. Maybe he doesn't understand kind of what NFL open is quite yet. You normally learn that when you get a couple of starts underneath your belt. So to me, that ends up being the matchup that matters. Is this is how bad it's been for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So for them, they have to be much better in coverage, or even a first, a guy making his second start with a wide receiver group that's not great. They can make you pay if you don't play a lot better. But who's your plus factor in this one?
Yeah, and the way that your plus factor kind of went off of my match that matters, my plus factor goes off yours, and it is Drake May. It's exactly what you said in how effective can he be, because he will let the ball fly. 10 plus yards downfield, or throws of 10 plus yards downfield. He had 10 of those already. He was 5 of 10. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. So mixed results there, but he's clearly not afraid to try and push the ball down the field. And I think he will try. I think you should expect a lot of play action again, because that was so effective for him in the very small sample size that we have of Drake May. But he was 4 for 4, 20 yards, a touchdown that came off of play action. So you kind of have to be wary of that and how well this offensive line can hold up for him. It wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad as I think we were anticipating when Drake May was getting his first start against the Houston Texans, which just still the decision baffles me. But this is, he's playing with house money at this point, and so is this New England Patriots offense in general, because there aren't any expectations. So he is really able to prioritize. Drake May is really able to prioritize his development and, making the throws that he needs to make and getting comfortable with his reads and getting comfortable with throwing guys open and knowing what NFL open looks like with really no pressure. And that is going to, in turn, stress this Jags defense, I think, a lot when you have a quarterback that can play that freely, provided you don't get him, he's not on the ground and this offensive line can hold up for him a little bit.
Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons is the first 1 p.m. game that we will start with here. I think Seahawks are really wanting to come out with a win in this one. Not that the Falcons don't, obviously, but it's a team that lost to the New York Giants at home. It's a team that's just, in my opinion, we saw some of the frustrations on the sideline with them last week as well. And so this is just a group that I think is really, really needing a win, and they're going to be focused and they're going to give the Falcons their absolute best, even as the road team here. What's your matchup that matters, Carmen?
I think you and I have the same one, but I think there's actually a lot of things to go along with this matchup, which is just simply the Falcons' defensive line against the Seattle offensive line. We know that the Falcons have just struggled mightily to affect the quarterback, to get any sort of pressure. They have just 5 sacks this season. That is a league low. They make up for it a little bit in coverage, but this defensive front is just not being effective. And we've seen Geno Smith when he's not under pressure. He has the 6th best passing grade, according to PFF. So you have that, but then you also have an offensive line in front of Geno that's not really doing him any favors at this point. I do think it might be a little bit inflated, given that, so they've allowed 99 pressures, which is, I believe they lead the league in that. But I think it's a little bit inflated just because of how many times the Seahawks are asking Geno Smith to drop back and pass. He leads the league with 277 pass attempts. He's got 307 dropbacks, which is the most in the league as well. So you do see a little bit of an inflated number when it comes to the pressures allowed by this offensive line, given just the volume with which Geno Smith is being asked to throw the ball. I do think it's still not a great stat that the line is letting up this many pressures, given that Geno has the 11th fastest time to throw. So it's not as if he's sitting back and holding the ball and making things tough on his offensive line. That needs to get better, and they're going to have an opportunity against this Atlanta defensive front that just hasn't been able to bring pressure. But on the flip side of that, if Atlanta can bring pressure, that's going to spell a really hard day for Geno Smith.
Yeah, I agree. And I can flip it to the other side, actually, for another matchup that matters, because I think the opposite side of the trenches means a lot as well. On this very show last week, we talked about, or I brought up how Kirk, we think that he is just a natural at dealing with pressure, that even though he's not super mobile, he knows when to get rid of the ball. He knows where to go with it. He knows what his hot reads are if there is pressure there. This season, 7 turnover-worthy plays when he is pressured. I mean, that's one of the most in the NFL, if not the most in the NFL. I haven't checked since it was last week, but that is still a formula for him, is if he is pressured, he is putting the ball in harm's way. Now, the matchup that matters is the Falcons' offensive line versus Seattle's, I should just say, pressure package or pressure plan, however they want to come at them. Because last week, I get it, they were playing against the Carolina Panthers. Carolina is not really great at getting after the passer, but Chris Lidstrom, 89.0 overall grade. Matthew Bergeron, 82.4. Caleb McGarry, 80.5. Newsome with a 78.7. Matthews with a 72.2. Like, this is a really good offensive line performance last week for the Atlanta Falcons, and they're going to need it again, I think, because when you look at the Seahawks, their pass rush win percentage as a team is lower. It's in the bottom half of the league, but their total pressures generated is 11th. I wonder if they're going to try to dial it up a little bit more, because when you look at total blitzes that they have, they're ranked 15th in the NFL right now at total blitzes called on pass rush opportunities. But when you look at total pressures when they have blitz, they're almost a top 10 team. So it is something that I wonder if they're going to lean a little bit more into to try to overwhelm the Falcons' offensive line, really dial up that pressure. And I think that could be an area that is a big-time matchup that matters, because, Kirk turns the ball over a couple of times. That could be all that you need there. And I'll kind of weave that into my plus factor, because you brought this up a little bit. Geno Smith deep ball in this game, I think, is going to be a pivotal part of who ends up being on top on the scoreboard when it's all said and done. Geno Smith, you mentioned all the total attempts that he has. He's passing the ball a lot. They're asking a lot of this dude. On throws of 10 or more yards down the field, Geno Smith, he's 2nd in total attempts. He's 6th in total big-time throws, and he's 9th in passing grade when he is targeting players deep down the field. Now, on the flip side, the Falcons secondary, bottom 5 in the NFL at receiving, and when I say that in bottom 5, I mean, like, that's like not a good way, not like, okay, they've given up the least, they've given up some of the most. Total receptions allowed, completion percentage yielded, and forced incompletions with those throws of 10 or more yards. So they're kind of getting their hands on them, but man, they're also letting a lot of those be completed. It felt like that was also a big point of contention with like DK Metcalf when he was pissed off. He's like, hey, like, give me the ball deep downfield, give me something to work with, all this kinds of stuff. And so I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to want to push the ball deep down the field. And the Falcons have been giving up a lot of passes of 10 or more yards down the field. So it feels like, Falcons are favored in this game. Feels like it should be kind of a game that the Falcons win. I don't know about that. I might be taking Seattle as my dog here of the week. But what about you? What's your plus factor in this one?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. I do want to reiterate with this, there's problems all along the Atlanta defense. And I have the Atlanta secondary as kind of my plus factor because of all the things you just said about, can you be a little bit more effective in coverage? Can you limit those explosive plays? Can you get takeaways? They are middle of the pack right now with 7 takeaways on this season. And when you have a front that is failing to get pressure, it's not for lack of trying either, which I want to kind of reiterate and hit and, drive it home, because the Atlanta Falcons are tied with the Buccaneers in blitz rate. They have the 7th highest blitz rate in the league, and yet they have just 5 sacks to show for it. That is an abysmal amount of production out of a defense that is supposed to be more aggressive. And then you need, if that doesn't work up front, then that places a lot of stress on the secondary, which is why you see some of these passes and these throws connecting down the field, because as aggressive as the secondary wants to be, when you don't have the help of the front, it just is, it overwhelms them, quite frankly. And it's pretty easy to do so if you're throwing the ball down the field. So can you take the ball away a little bit more? Can you be more aggressive? Can you get more of those forced incompletions down the field? Can you lock up that last level of the defense as a way of helping this defensive front? This defense is just not working together in the way that I think Raheem Morris has probably envisioned it. And that's going to be a really big determining factor. And I think that if these DBs can step up a little bit more, that is going to be a really big plus factor for Atlanta.
We got some people in the chat. Somebody's asking if they should start Geno over Mahomes in fantasy. I think so. Not that I'm saying that Geno's a better quarterback than Mahomes, but when it comes to fantasy numbers, again, I think this is right for a handful of big time throws.
We will get to how good Patrick Mahomes is against the Niners, though, when we get a little bit further and preview that game. I don't know that I would make that decision, Trev. It just being totally honest.
All right, now you got. All right, now you got to watch to the end of the show. That was good. That was good on you. Now you got to watch to the end of the show. By the way, Dave Solfaro, our Do Everything dude, but also researcher when the show is going on, said most interceptions when pressure this season. I mentioned Kirk Cousins, one of the highest. He's got 5. Ironically enough, Geno Smith has 6. So, okay, let's go to Titans at Bills next 1 p.m. matchup that we have here. Interesting because the Bills have a new face in their offense after feels like really needing it from what we have seen over the last 2 weeks. Titans roller coaster every single week, but what's the matchup that matters here for you, Carmen?
Much in the way that I was talking about Bo Nix, a guy that's right there with him on not being able to push the ball down the field or being inaccurate or, creating turnover-worthy plays is Will Levis. And so Will Levis versus pushing the ball down the field is my matchup that matters. On throws of 10 or more yards downfield, he's 18 of 40, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So again, it's a story of creating more picks than you are production as far as scores go. I need Will Levis. I mean, we're at the part of the season where I know we were joking about, like, now we know what we're looking at. We do know what we're looking at a little bit more, and this needs to get better if Tennessee is going to stick with Will Levis, and this offense is going to be viable whatsoever. They need to sustain scoring drives. That's something that the Bills do so incredibly well, and you are going to need to try to keep pace with that. And to do that, Will Levis is going to have to push the ball down the field accurately and without turning the ball over. And it's going to need to end in the end zone. I believe the Titans currently ranked 23rd in scoring drive percentage. They're going up against a team that's ranked 6th. So that's the big kind of stat that I honed in on there, where these drives, this offense is just not producing in Tennessee, and you're going to need to do that against the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I think the Bills can also put a lot of pressure on the Titans if they can run the ball as well as they've been able to this entire season. James Cook obviously missed last game, but Ray Davis and Ty Johnson were right there to pick up where he could not being in that game. And I think the Bills run game versus the Titans run defense is where I'm looking here, because if the Bills can really control this game, control the clock, the time of possession, everything, I think you'll really start to put pressure on Tennessee to hit a lot of those deep shots, but maybe more importantly, attempt a lot of those deep shots, because sure, it can be great for them, but it can also really hurt them, as we have seen through the first couple of weeks of the season. So when you look at the Bills, they're 7th in the NFL right now in team rushing grade. They are 5th in EPA per rush. The Tennessee Titans run defense, they're allowing the 3rd lowest EPA per rush allowed. So that is an area where they are better. But if the Bills can really best that, it's hard to necessarily see the Titans defense slowing them down in a lot of ways. Ray Davis, 4.9 yards per carry average last week when he had 20 carries and 97 yards. But it wasn't just him. Ty Johnson had those only 4 carries, but 34 yards. So it was good. It was an 8.5 yards per carry average. Obviously, Josh Allen and what he could do with his legs can really be a threat as well. So if the Bills can continue to run the ball really well, I think it's just going to be their game to lose against the Titans. And maybe they hit a couple of deep shots, because everything changes if you hit a couple of explosives like that. But it will require the Titans to do that if their run defense cannot step up to this game the way that they have been throughout this point of the season. They're going up against a really good rushing attack. But what's your plus factor in this game?
Unsurprisingly, it's Amari Cooper, to see what he can
somebody
bring.
Somebody had to bring up Amari Cooper.
Yeah, somebody had to bring up Amari Cooper, who's now a Buffalo Bill. He was obviously being wasted in Cleveland with just not having the production at the quarterback position and not being able to get him the ball effectively. So I think a lot of his stats up until this point, he ranks 67th in PFF grade among wide receivers. I don't expect that to continue. I expect that to go up and up and up with Josh Allen now as his quarterback. So really interested to see what he can bring to this offense. Really interested to see how much, how productive Josh Allen can now be. I mean, we've seen him elevate his receivers. And I do think that the Cooper acquisition was kind of a luxury for the Bills, because I think that they would have been fine given their rushing attack on offense and the fact that they do have some developing wide receivers in that room, in that wideout room. But now you're going to add a veteran. You're going to add a guy that is going to be able to be kind of one of those guys that can really lead the wideout room because it's so young, and a guy that can be immediately productive with Josh Allen. I mean, this is just now really going to put the Bills over the edge, I feel like, and I'm really excited to see it.
Yeah, I'll flip to, I guess, the other side of the trenches in what I was talking about before, where, well, I guess it's the same side of the trenches. I was talking about run defense with the Titans, but I think pass rush is the X factor in this one, because the Titans just straight up have not been good at pass rush so far this season. They're 30th in pass rush win percentage as a team. They're very last in pressures. Harold Landry is the only player with more than 10 pressures. He only has 14 as well. There's only one player, it's Arden Key, with a pass rush win percentage in double digits above 10%. So it's just been tough sledding for this Titans team to be able to get pressure every single week. And look, if you let Josh Allen sit there, the longer he has the ball in his hands, it feels like the worse it's going to be for the defense. And so if you're really not able to bring him pressure, not that he's been bad under pressure throughout his career, but he was surprisingly bad against pressure 2 weeks ago. And so that still is a recipe, even for some of the best quarterbacks, to rattle him, get him off rhythm and all that. So I just feel like if the Titans cannot have a good day at the office when it comes to pass rushing, like dead last numbers in the NFL, I mean, it's just going to get you carved up. I again think that the way that the Bills run the football, if they're able to even do that at an even rate with going up against a good run defense team in the Titans, if you can't get after Josh Allen, it's going to, going back to kind of what I was saying, it's going to demand even more so that you hit some of those crazy long shots. And do you even want to be attempting all those throughout the game? I think we'll see in this one, but it feels like we're both kind of leaning Bills in this game. Yeah. Bengals at Browns. So it's in Cleveland, divisional matchup, obviously a big deal. Matchup that matters. What do you got?
Browns defensive line against the Bengals offensive line. Cincinnati's doing well as far as their offensive line goes. They are much improved. They are 6th in pass blocking grade at a 69.5. And they rank 6th in pressure percentage allowed. Also, Joe Burrow has wheels. Who knew?
Better wheels than I thought.
Well, I think we were all like, oh, he can do that. Okay, great.
He's fully healthy though, which is great. That's what that run told me. He is fully healthy. He doesn't care. He was tucking it, running it, and it was like, all right, Joe. It was the Shaq meme. It was like, I was unfamiliar with your game.
I mean, like, it's not even really anything he did at LSU. So
No. Now, like he's slippery. You know, he could be a
yes.
escape artist, but like a run like
It's
that,
more
man.
like moving around in the pocket and if he can do that, and which is like come around to bite him in the butt too a couple of times. But yeah, I mean, like he took that intentional grounding penalty because like he like went around and did a bunch of things, but he was like still in the pocket and ended up throwing it just, But that now what Joe Burrow can get himself out of sticky situations. He can get himself out of pressure, which the offensive line isn't even allowing at this point. Great. That's even better dynamic to add to this Bengals offense. Not that they need it because they're not the issue. But the Browns, we'll get to that in a second. But the Browns defensive line, obviously led by Myles Garrett, they ranked 21st in EPA per play in the pass rush. So it really is just Myles Garrett in a lot of ways that you have to worry about. But they are tied for the 10th most in sacks. So they can affect the quarterback. They can make life, a little bit tricky, hard on him. They can hurry up the quarterback, force some errant throws, all that kind of stuff that you have to be wary of when you're going against a front that's this good and a front that includes Myles Garrett at the end of the day, who is top 10 in a lot of these major pass rushing statistics and metrics that we use.
I am actually going to flip to the other side and say that I think the matchup that matters is Brown's offensive line versus the Bengals defensive line here because it's two somewhat struggling units, although I will get to what the Bengals are doing in a second. The Browns offensive line, though, I said this on the review show on Monday. This is an offensive line that I think we've talked about this offensive line as one of the best in the NFL over the last 3 to 4 years. And with all the injuries that they've dealt with, I think in our minds, at least me personally, I've thought, okay, well, yeah, they're struggling, but they were a top 5 group before this. So struggling is probably, middle of the pack in the NFL. They're still probably okay. Carmen, they're terrible. They're really bad. The only offensive line with a lower team blocking grade than the Browns is the Patriots. That's it. 53.4 overall blocking grade this season. They're tied for the most sacks allowed on third down with 12. They're tied for the most sacks credited to the offensive line on third down with 8. I mean, obviously Deshaun Watson's not playing well. Obviously, like there's a reason why we're talking about Deshaun Watson. His play has been poor as well. Their offensive line is almost worse than Deshaun. And so I think certainly, like if you made a change, you went with Jameis, I think things would be a little bit better because I don't even know if Deshaun's arm is, what it used to be. But maybe you just get the backup quarterback bump and the team's excited for it. And Jameis isn't afraid to throw it deep down the field, we know. But I mean, behind this offensive line, it would regulate anyways. It would kind of come down from that high because unless they play better, it's really hard to envision the Cleveland Browns having success. Now, the Bengals defensive line specifically, I think is very interesting because through the first 4 weeks of the season, we just talked about this as all right, this is Trey Hendrickson and no one else. And even though it's still Trey Hendrickson's defensive line for sure, over the last 2 weeks, these have been the 2 weeks in which the team has had their most total pressures in a single game. And that's not just Trey Hendrickson. Sam Hubbard's playing better. BJ Hill is playing better. And so the defensive line is getting a little bit better. They're no longer bottom of the barrel like they were for the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season. So with that defensive line getting a little better, this is a ripe matchup for them to say, okay, first 3-4 weeks of the season, warm up, we're throwing it out. We're feasting on a bad offensive line, and we'll see what they're really made of here with this game going up against a struggling Cleveland Browns offensive line. I will say my plus factor in this game, Carmen. I don't know if you read the Players Tribune piece by Nick Chubb, but Nick Chubb is coming back and he is playing in this game, and it is a wonderful tribute in the Players Tribune. If you guys have not read it, you should. Nick Chubb talks about what he went through overcoming this injury, how it was the second catastrophic knee injury that he has had, the one that he had at Georgia, and reflecting on what that was like versus this one and reflecting what this was like and truly not knowing if he would ever play football again. When he got hurt at Georgia, when he had the gruesome knee injury at Georgia, he says in the article, sure, it's a tough injury and there's a lot of work ahead, but he's like, I never thought about I wasn't going to play football again. He's like, at this point in my career going through this again, he's like, there were thoughts about that creeped up of, am I ever going to play football again? And, for him to be able to come back and even just make it to this point, there's a press conference. I think it was on Wednesday where he got up and got to speak to the media. And as he got to the podium, you hear in the background, his teammates are going crazy. They're yelling, they're hollering for him just because he's back up there on that podium, getting to talk about what it's like getting ready for a game again. And so it's just a really, really good feel-good story. I don't know what Nick Chubb is going to be like. I don't know if it's going to be the Nick Chubb of old, but it's just going to be really, really cool to see him out there and put a helmet back on. So to me, whatever he could bring to the table as a spark to this team, not only in the yards that he would be able to get, but also just the inspiration, I think it'd be a plus factor for Cleveland in this one.
Yeah, no, I love that. And we obviously hope that he can return to form and do some good things and trust the knee. And I have to imagine that it's so much like once the knee is healed, there's the whole other process of healing the brain and figuring out, can you trust your knee? Can you trust yourself? It's a whole thing with these guys. And I'm so glad that these guys have an outlet like the Players Tribune to really like peel back the curtain and say, this is what we actually have to go through to come back from injuries. And it's a really long and prolonged process. So I love that. I'm going to go back to the Bengals defense and see another thing that they are doing well, which is they are limiting explosive plays of 20 yards or more. They have allowed just 13 of those, which is the third fewest in the league. So you have the ability to cap explosive plays. That's great. You talked about how they have been the last couple of weeks. They have been a lot more effective. This defensive front in particular, Trey Hendrickson is finally getting some help, but they are still 26th in EPA per play against. They only have 90 total pressures. That ranks 20th in the league. They are 26th in touchdown drives allowed at 27.4%. That all needs to get better. That all needs to change. You need to keep stacking these games where it is obvious that the defense is limiting the scoring of its opponents, because that has been the bane of these Bengals' existence through the first 4 weeks of the season, especially where the offense is averaging almost 30 points, I think just over 30 points a game. And Joe Burrow's playing out of his mind. And yet the defense is allowing literally 0.1 points more per game on average. That needs to change. And I think, again, coupling this with the Giants game last week and this game against the Browns, which is a winnable game in the division, it's going to matter a whole lot. Limit the amount that they can score. And this is going to go a long way with gaining confidence back in that defense. And then the team as a whole, quite frankly.
Texans at Packers, the next matchup here that I want to talk about. An incredible game that we have setting up in Green Bay. These are two of the, top 8, top 5 teams in the NFL, however you have your power ranking set up right now. No matter how you slice it, though, I think this is shaping up to be a really great game. Two really great teams, fantastic quarterbacks in this one, playing at a very, very high level. Carmen, your matchup that matters in a big-time matchup. What do we got here?
Yeah, I'm going to go kind of more of the obvious one, which is this Texans D-line against the Packers O-line. Packers O-line ranks first. They lead the league in pass blocking grade.
Yeah.
In run blocking grade, 28th. That is a huge discrepancy. Right. It hasn't mattered as much because of Josh Jacobs being the type of back that he is and being able to bulldoze his way through the line of scrimmage to get outside into space even. That's been a huge help for this Green Bay offense, but the line needs to do their part against this Texans defensive line, which can obviously get pressure with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, a player that the Packers are very familiar with, by the way, from his time in Minnesota. But you also need to, if you're the Texans, you have an opportunity here against the run, which we don't really think about that as much when we talk about the Texans defense and the Texans defensive line, but they are good there too. So you need, it's whoever wins that battle, I think, because that's going to open up more things for this offense in Green Bay. We know that Green Bay, the sheer amount of targets that Jordan Love has as far as weapons goes, I mean, that's what makes this Green Bay offense so incredibly effective and really, really hard to defend, quite frankly, because of the fact that they are so diverse in the amount of guys that Jordan Love can throw the ball to. Even with a guy like Luke Musgrave going down, Tucker Kraft has stepped up. You are going to have, it looks like, your full offensive arsenal in that wideout room. And the way to kind of combat that, because there's no way to defend every single one of those guys on every single play, is to basically just get to Jordan Love and not let him get the ball out at all.
I think that the offensive line, defensive line matchup, for the reasons that you mentioned, is the big one. But specifically, the offensive tackles versus the edge rushers is where I wanted to highlight more. Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, they're both top. You mentioned how good that pass blocking is overall for this group. They are both top 13 pass blocking grades for offensive tackles in the NFL. So it's one of the best, offensive tackle pass blocking duos that we have in the league so far, 6 weeks through the season. On the other side, it's one of the best edge rush duos that we have in the NFL this season. Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, both of them are top 12 in total pressures. Hunter's got 25, Anderson's got 27. So this really is two of the best on each side going head to head. And I'm really, really excited for this one to see how these guys can hold up, because it is a strength on strength kind of a thing. So there's a lot of different matchups here, whether it's the secondary and what Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams are going to have for sort of the deep passes of CJ Stroud and that passing attack, which was, I didn't check it this week, but I checked it last week, and the Houston Texans were number one in the NFL in total explosive passing plays. And so they want to attack deep, but Xavier McKinney's been a ball hawk. Evan Williams, their rookie 4th-round safety, has been fantastic as well. So, those are obviously some matchups that matter as well. But I think specifically in the trenches, how that strength on strength is going to manifest itself, who gets the better of the other between Hunter and Anderson, and then Tom and Walker. That's going to be big time for me. What about the plus factor here in this matchup? What do you got?
It's Houston's red zone defense in particular, because they rank 28th right now. They're allowing a touchdown on 68.75% of red zone trips. And if you look at Green Bay, they have the most passing touchdowns in the league, red zone passing touchdowns specifically. They're tied with the Buccaneers, but they are 19th in red zone percentage overall. So they are pretty one-dimensional once they get inside the 20, and that should present an opportunity for Houston's red zone defense, which hasn't been good this season, to kind of, anticipate what they're going to do and shut them down and make sure that they are limiting the amount of production coming from Jordan Love and company inside the red zone in particular. Now, that doesn't speak to how Jordan Love can just kind of flick the ball off his back foot and hit Jaden Reed or Bo Melton even down the field. Not to mention Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, who's back with the team, all that. I believe Dontavian Wicks is coming back this game as well, so we'll have to see what the injury information is. But when they get inside the red zone, when the field shrinks, can you stop this Green Bay Packers defense or offense from scoring?
The injury report that I have from Wednesday, at least, has Jaden Reed limited participation, Dontavian Wicks limited participation, Christian Watson limited participation, Tucker Kraft as well. I am going to talk about one of those guys there for my plus factor, and I do think that it's Jaden Reed. Every time I watch this guy get the ball in his hands, I feel like it's just electric. I mean, I think that he could take it to the house every single time that he touches it. And I don't mean to take anything away from the other receivers, tight ends included, for Green Bay, but in my opinion, nobody puts fear on the defense like Jaden Reed does. I mean, he could beat you so many different ways, and when you look at his statistics this season, he's got 442 yards, the 7th most in the NFL, 220 yards after the catch, that's tied for 6th in the NFL, 6 contested catches, tied for 8th, and 11 catches of 15 yards or more, which is top 5. So he is a top 10, top 5 receiver this year in production in so many different types of categories. And he's the guy that, in my opinion, gives them the highest return on investment. Dontavian Wicks does have a higher threat percentage than him in terms of how often he is targeted per route he has run, but I think it's a volume thing because Reed's got a lot more routes out there than Wicks does. So to me, Reed's the guy that can certainly allow them. Recently, when you guys didn't feel like you could be your full self, like maybe you were hiding behind a mask or a costume, something like that. October, it's the season for wearing masks and costumes and Halloween and all that. But some of us feel like we could maybe be wearing a mask or having a costume on more often than we want to at work, social life, around the family, whatever it is. Therapy can be a really great way to accept all parts of yourself so you can take off the mask, not feel like you have to hide parts of yourself. I've been doing therapy for over a year and a half, and it's been fantastic for me. And it's been something that has really helped me understand kind of who I am, how my mind works, upbringing, things I was taught when I was younger. And it's like, oh, I kind of react to a situation because my parents acted like that, or just role models acted like that. And you realize that it's a lot deeper than just like, man, why did I handle this situation like this? Or maybe I'm like this and there's nothing I can do, I can change. And I promise you, it's something that is worth looking into and being the best version of yourself that you can be. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp is convenient, it's flexible, it's entirely online, and it's a way to get therapy that is right for you. You can just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. You can take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/PFF to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PFF. Colts Dolphins. Oh, man. He bummed out every time I talk about the Dolphins just because of what they were last year versus just how different things look for this team this year. But it's a matchup that could be winnable. I know it's on the road for them. Maybe they got a little bit of time, extra time off. I don't know. What do you think about this one? Matchup that matters. What do you got, Carmen?
Yeah, I think a lot of it still comes down to this Dolphins offensive line. I think in general, this has kind of been one of the things that's been exposed by Tua's injury, that obviously it's the lack of kind of planning if Tua were to go down at the quarterback position in particular, but it also kind of exposed the fact that the team didn't do enough to fortify the offensive line and sustain some of the injuries that they were inevitably going to have along that offensive line to protect whoever it was, whether it was Tua or somebody else. And that's where I need to see a little bit of improvement. And that's what I think can be a catalyst for this offense on top of what, Snoop can do or Snoop Huntley can do. The Dolphins have the fewest gains of 20 or more yards or plays of 20 or more yards on offense. They have just 12 on the season. But this Indianapolis Colts defensive line ranks 27th in total pressures and only has 56 hurries. It tied for 21st with the Cowboys in sacks with 13. So they haven't been extraordinarily effective either. And you think, all right, in the way that we talk about strength on strength, this is kind of two units that are struggling for both the Dolphins and for the Colts. And who's going to get the better of that, and how much can that be a catalyst for their team being effective? And I think that that's kind of what it comes down to in this game, where both teams are producing at the level that you would want them to. And you're right. I feel so bad for the Dolphins and for Dolphins fans in general, because the season started out so promising. And yeah.
I'm specifically interested in this one because it looks like Anthony Richardson's going to start, right? And it looks like a matchup where they will have the opportunity in Indianapolis, I'm saying, to attack the Dolphins deep down the field, because the Dolphins are fourth worst in the NFL at completions of 10 or more. This is fourth in the NFL. I'm reading my own chicken scratch here. They've given up 10 completions of 20 yards or more. That's fourth worst in the NFL. That's the way you're supposed to say that, Trev. And when you look at Anthony Richardson, a lot of his best plays are the arm strength. We've seen the crazy throws deep down the field. Alec Pierce has been incredible over the last couple of weeks at connecting with, whether it's been Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson or whoever it's been. This is just an opportunity where clearly this is a way to unleash the arm strength of Anthony Richardson and really hit the defense over the top, especially when you continue to run the ball very well. We know the Colts have one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line this season. So you run the ball enough, you get a little bit of dual threat with Anthony Richardson, you're keeping guys in to spy, whether it's a safety or a linebacker, there's less guys in deep coverage, boom, that's when you hit him over the top. And I think that it's a matchup where the Colts can continue to see that success. They're top 10, if not top 5 in a lot of those categories when it comes to those deep shots down the field, receiving grade, passing grade, all that kinds of stuff. So completion percentage is a little bit lower, but again, that's kind of a Richardson thing. You would think of that with him having a lower completion percentage anyway. So it's hard to necessarily say, I'm going to take the last couple of weeks of statistics with Joe Flacco and translate them into this week, because you do have Anthony Richardson in there now. But on Miami's side of things, that has been a constant for them throughout the season, is really struggling with those deep passes. And with Richardson back in there and his arm talent, you could see a lot more of them. What's the plus factor for you here?
Yeah, well, those are just lower completion percentage throws when you're throwing that deep down the field. But somebody who's connecting on those very well, it goes very much along with what you were just saying, is Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce leads the league in yards per reception. 28.31 yards per reception is his average. That is absolutely incredible. We are not talking about Alec Pierce enough, quite frankly. On 20 plus yard throws, he ranks first with 6 catches, 295 total yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns, which ranks tied for 4th in the league. So this is something that he's just been incredible at. It is the reason for the production as far as the Indianapolis Colts offense goes. And this is something that marries up very well with the strength of Anthony Richardson, which you were just talking about. And that's pushing the ball down the field, airing the ball out, and connecting and getting these chunk plays that really puts points on the board very quickly for Indianapolis. And especially if you do that early on in the game, you can put your opponent on its heels. And we've seen the Colts be successful when Anthony Richardson can connect deep down the field. So in order to do that, his man is going to be Alec Pierce. And how effective they are together with Anthony Richardson coming back is going to be a huge factor in if the Colts can pull this one out.
This feels like a massive obvious, but you mentioned how much the Dolphins offense has really struggled with production and explosives and everything like that. Tyreek Hill's the X factor here for me because I feel like he always has to be with the Dolphins in its current state. When you look at Tyreek Hill, receiving grade, yards per route run, yards per game, all at career lows this year. Now, of course, he doesn't have a great quarterback throwing in the ball. When we went from Patrick Mahomes to, Tua Tagovailoa, certainly in Mike McDaniel's offense as well. And it's just been explosive years, one after the other. He was completely unguardable over the last 2 years. And I think he still has that talent to him, but it's harder to get him the football. When you look at his average depth of target, it's almost at a career high. So I think it might be time to really start to lower his average depth of target and try to allow his speed to really win and create throwing windows off the line of scrimmage with shorter throws, trying to make him a yards after catch guy instead of a, hey, I can get open, deep type of a player. I know that goes into their offensive philosophy, but very clearly 6 weeks into the season, it's not working for them. So to me, he's the plus factor, but if the Dolphins can use him in a different way, let's lower that average depth of target. Let's try to get those yards per route run up. Let's try to get the yards after catch up and see what we can do with that speed, because you cannot be wasting it the way that they have just not been able to connect with Tyreek Hill over the last couple of weeks, certainly since Tua has been out. So I think a little bit of a shift in an offensive philosophy is due for the Miami Dolphins if they want to win this football game on the road. This is a big one. This next one, huge. Lions, Vikings, a duel in the NFC North of two of the best teams in the NFL. I think these are two of the top 5 teams in the league right now going head to head. This one's in Minnesota. Lions coming off a couple of really nice games, but Minnesota obviously has not lost this season. So they're coming off 5 great games and a bye. They've been preparing for this week for a couple of weeks now. Carmen, what do you think the matchup that matters is for two of the best teams in the NFL going head to head here?
Me, the Minnesota Vikings, looking forward to this for 2 weeks because I have been so excited for this game. As soon as, Minnesota went on their bye and I saw who they were playing afterwards, I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is the top 2 teams in point differential right now. Minnesota is top, Lions second. They both, have great records. Minnesota, like you said, has not been beaten yet. And if you look back at that game, the last game they played against the Jets in London, I mean, this is a Brian Flores defense that has put every single quarterback that they have faced in a complete blender, including the most experienced quarterback in the league, which is Aaron Rodgers. Not only did you force 3 interceptions from Aaron Rodgers, you forced just his 5th pick 6 in his 20-year career. That is just insane numbers. And then when you consider everything that they're able to do on defense and all the teams that they've gone against, this is for real. And so the matchup that matters for me is this Lions offensive line, particularly against the creativity of Brian Flores' defense. And I say the offensive line, not Jared Goff, for a very particular reason. Because of the fact of what Brian Flores can do on early downs, especially, the way that he mixes up his fronts, it is a lot for an offensive line to pick up. And Jared Goff has one of the best offensive lines in the league, if not the best offensive line in the league in front of him. I have no doubt in my mind that Jared Goff can diagnose and understand what he's looking at. But when the post snap does not match the pre-snap look, it is up to your offensive line to be able to pick up all of the crazy stunts, all of the crazy blitz packages, the different players that are going to come in on a blitz that aren't just going to be a part of the front. It's so confusing for offensive lines. And so this is going to be a huge test for, again, what is one of the best offensive lines in football, to be able to pick up all of the different things that Brian Flores is going to try to do. On top of that, they can just beat you outright. You have guys like Jonathan Grenard leading the team with 29 pressures. I think no one talked about Jonathan Grenard, the pickup of Jonathan Grenard enough because everybody just looked at the Vikings giving up Danielle Hunter, and they were like, "Oh, why would you do that?" Well, they got Jonathan Grenard in return, who the year before had 12 and a half sacks for the Houston Texans. This was not, I mean, it wasn't a one-to-one because there's not a lot of players that can go one-to-one with Danielle Hunter, but Jonathan Grenard, on top of adding a guy like Andrew Van Ginkel, you drafted Dallas Turner, and then you have guys like Blake Cashman, too, that were added to this roster that are being factors in the pass rush and being used in so many different ways that it's opening things up for the edge guys and Jonathan Grenard in particular. So I'm so excited to see these trenches go at it. But what we know, if there's anything we know about this Minnesota defense, it's not just the trenches that are going to be coming after you. So how can this offensive line deal with that is going to dictate how effective this Lions team can be.
I also think that's the best matchup that matters here in this game, and I think that has to be the main talking point, so I'm glad that you brought it up. I will flip to another one just because this game is so good. The Lions in the secondary versus the Minnesota Vikings at wide receiver. I mean, it's going to be huge, right? Because when you look at the coverage grade for this Lions team, it was low. It was bottom half of the NFL. Sometimes it was bottom 10 in the NFL last year. They made a commitment this offseason to fixing it, and right now they have a top 10 coverage unit in the league when it comes to just their corners and safeties. And the Minnesota Vikings have a top 10 receiving group in the league when it comes to their wide receivers, but also you got to throw Aaron Jones in there as well. I almost said Aaron Judge because I've seen so much baseball. Hawkinson? What'd you say?
And I said, and probably maybe TJ Hawkinson. They opened the practice window on him. He practiced with them, the team in London. He could be coming back.
I mean, that would obviously be huge for them as well, because what I was going to say is Justin Jefferson is doing he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for like having an elevated receiving grade for the team. Now, it's not to say that like Addison and Naylor haven't also played well. I think they have. It's just, Jefferson's still over 30% of a wide receiver usage. They're still obviously building their passing attack through Justin Jefferson. Do the Lions have anyone to cover that player in particular? It's Terrion Arnold. Carlton Davis looks like he's going to play. Brian Branch was a limited participant, but it looks like he's going to play. So I feel like it's going to take a village to really stop Justin Jefferson, but that's sort of been the case in years past. Now they've got other options to be able to throw the ball to. And so I think, honestly, the real matchup that matters here is just Kevin O'Connell versus Aaron Glenn, like those coordinators going head to head against one another. Who's going to be able to stay one step ahead in this game and use their stars in the secondary and their stars at receiver versus one another? So I still, for as good as I think the Lions have played in the secondary, you got to give the advantage to what Kevin O'Connell is doing. I think he's by far the front runner for Coach of the Year, and obviously how they're going to use Justin Jefferson too. So I would give the Vikings the edge in this situation, but I cannot wait to see how this one plays out. What about a plus factor here for you in this game?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see actually how this Viking or the Lions secondary can fare without having the push up front from Aiden Hutchinson now, who is out indefinitely for the rest of the season, could maybe come back in the playoffs. I'm not going to put that past a guy like Hutch, but he was a huge factor just given how many pressures he was generating up front and how much he was helping out the back level as a result. So that's going to be really interesting to me. And if this Lions secondary can step up. But for my plus factor, it was Brian Flores today, or not today, I believe yesterday, got to the podium and said, hey, Ben Johnson has a really creative scheme. He can do a lot of different things with his players. How do you envision yourself contending with that? And Brian Flores literally just looked at the camera or looked at the reporter and said, I plan on fighting fire with fire. That should instill so much excitement for this game. And it's why I'm so excited. And I'm so excited to see what Brian Flores is able to do against someone like Ben Johnson, more specifically, someone like Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is like, if I have to boil this down to a specific player, it is Jahmyr Gibbs as a plus factor because of how effective he can be in so many different ways. He is such a wonderfully good component to an offense that is so creative out of Ben Johnson. I mean, Ben Johnson literally loads the clip every week with trick plays specifically for his opponent. That's why this last game against the Dallas Cowboys, when they were trotting out all of these really fun scoring plays for offensive linemen, which just made me love him more, everybody was like, why are you showing everybody these trick plays? Why are you putting these on tape? You're already up. You don't need them. And I'm like, no. This was specifically for the Dallas Cowboys. This is because the Lions and Ben Johnson are petty kings. They wanted to get back at the Dallas Cowboys, not only for winning that game, but for the whole Dan Skipper reporting is eligible and the ref not hearing it and yada, yada, yada. He was going to feature the offensive line in this game. So that clip has been unloaded and now reloaded. I cannot wait to see what they have in store for a Flores defense that is very, very creative, but they can get creative as well. And that runs through Jahmyr Gibbs, who I cannot wait. That keeps this offense multidimensional. I can't even express to you how excited I am about this.
This is awesome, and it's kind of a shame that it's on 1 p.m. To be honest with you, I wish it was a primetime game, and I wish they could flex this game, but here we are. The plus factor for me, you mentioned it a little bit, you touched on it. It is the Lions defensive line without Hutchinson. And I'll name some statistics for you just because it's PFF show and we're going to do that. Hutchinson has 45 total pressures this year. The next guy is Levon Wuzurike at 16 or at 17, and then Aleem McNeil at 16. So it's a massive drop off in total pressures. But what I'm most curious about isn't just sort of saying like, oh, somebody's got to step up. Specifically, I remember watching Hutchinson because on the In the Trenches show, Ollie Conley and I were focusing on Hutch. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, something like that. The Lions' entire defensive line structure is based around Hutchinson getting a one-on-one. And it's based around him getting a one-on-one in such a favorable situation that most offensive tackles, most right tackles in the NFL just don't have a chance. And that is not to take anything away from Aiden Hutchinson. Some of the best passers rushers in the NFL are left defensive ends for that exact reason, because you can really structure things for them to get favorable matchups and allow your stud pass rusher to win them. And that's exactly what Hutchinson was doing. But the way the Lions have set up Hutchinson, he's often aligned outside of the tackle's outside shoulder. And then the nearest defensive lineman to him is normally a 3-technique defensive tackle, somebody who is right on the outside shoulder of the guard, or sometimes it's even the inside shoulder of the guard. It's a little bit closer. They'll rotate it a little bit closer in there so that not only is he taking the attention of the guard, but also the center. The guard does not have the ability then to kick out and help the tackle from Hutchinson, who is at a wider angle. And that is why you see Hutchinson win so much with that inside spin move that is so deadly. It's because he has the space to do it, not just because he's talented enough to do it, which he is, but it's the fact that the way their defensive line is set up is for him to get that one-on-one with that interior defensive lineman set up on the inside shoulder of the guard so that the guard cannot help, because they know that the center is not going to be able to get in front of that defensive lineman quick enough, so that if the guard doesn't help, well, then the defensive tackle is just going to have a free run at the quarterback. So you almost have to pick your battles with how the Lions have set up Hutchinson so far this season. So my plus factor here is not just, okay, who needs to step up a little bit with Hutchinson? It's how they step up without Hutchinson. What does the defensive line look like at this point? Are you completely shifting your philosophy to, okay, now we're going to tuck the defensive ends in. We're going to play a little bit more traditional, maybe allow Onwuzurike or Aleem McNeil to play more 3-technique one-on-one matchups against guards in the middle. How are you going to try to make up for Hutchinson no longer being there? Or do you genuinely think that it is a next man up? You're going to play the same thing, and you're going to try to put somebody exactly where Hutchinson was and tell them to go win their one-on-ones? That's going to be fascinating to me. And whatever they try to do there, that's a plus factor to me, because if it works, they're obviously going to be cooking. And if it doesn't, that's a major issue for them moving forward to be able to get after the quarterback. So that is my plus factor.
That's going to, I don't think there's a way to replace Aiden Hutchinson 1-for-1. And Aaron Glenn pretty much came out this week and said as much. So I do think that they're going to switch into something completely different. And that's why I do think that Brian Branch is going to be a huge factor in this, because if I know anything about Aaron Glenn, he's not afraid to use guys like that in the pass rush, in kind of, bringing him in from different areas, making offensive lines account for him. That's a way to kind of get around not having the Hutchinson and not having your focal point, is just to completely shift the focal point and give a team, something that they're not quite frankly ready for. And Brian Branch really likes to hit people too. So
edge rusher Brian Branch is what you're saying. They're going to put edge. They're going to take Brian Branch and just put him in the Hutchinson role, hand in the dirt, 3-point stance.
Put him on a Cub front. Put him on a Cub front. Move him up on the line. Like, it'd be great.
I actually do think that, yeah, he is going to be a pivotal part of this as well, that we did not bring enough up him. We did not bring his name up enough for this matchup. He is going to be a major chess piece for them. Eagles, Giants, NFC East matchup here. The Saquon Barkley revenge game, if you will, which is kind of my matchup that matters here. I think that Saquon Barkley and what he could be for the Philadelphia Eagles, specifically, it needs to be better than what it was last week. And yeah, I jokingly kind of said my matchup that matters is Saquon versus revenge. I don't know how much Saquon hates the Giants, so I don't know if it's going to be that. He's probably slighted, certainly, with them not prioritizing him and bringing him back and making him the face of the franchise. But, he's been having some really good games over the course of this season with his new team. He's 12th in PFF rushing grade. He's 3rd in total rushing yards, 9th in yards after contact. Forced missed tackles, he's top 15. Rushes of 10 or more yards, he's top 15 as well. So it's a really good year, really solid year, I think, all around for Saquon Barkley. But in particular, I looked at their matchup last week against the Cleveland Browns, and where they won that game, Carmen, I felt like they were too feast or famine with their two receivers coming back in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And that's what I was a little worried about with this team is, yeah, okay, obviously it always looks better when you get your stud receivers back, but it looked like they leaned on them too much to win this game. You can't just count on the explosiveness at all times. This should be a team that runs the football well, and they did not do that last week. 3.2 yards per carry for Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley as a combined team last week. And like I said, I know it's a good Cleveland defensive line. It's a good Cleveland defense, but if you're the Eagles, it cannot be just, all right, shot plays to A.J. Brown or shot plays to Devontae Smith as good as they are. They need to be a much better team at running the football, and they're up against another really good defensive line this week, but they've got to show more in the run game, in my opinion. So that, to me, is that matchup that matters. But what about you?
Yeah, for that reason, that's my plus factor is Saquon Barkley. Again, he's going to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, a little bit of an extra motivation. He did say that he doesn't know he doesn't think that the fans will boo him in New York. And again, this is a bitter rival. And I think that even if he wasn't prioritized and fans know that he wasn't prioritized by the New York Giants organization, to go willingly to the Philadelphia Eagles is not going to fly with any other team in this division. And so I do expect that Saquon Barkley will probably get booed. And does that add to his motivation? The Giants are really middle of the pack as far as run defense goes. So you're probably going to have an opportunity there. So take advantage of it. Like you're saying, you should be running the ball. That's the reason you went and you got Saquon Barkley. I get that you want to use your stud wide receivers. You want to use the guys that you're paying, but you're paying Saquon Barkley too. And again, that just kind of opens up another dimension to this offense, especially if you get Jalen Hurts involved in the run game too. Then you have a situation like they have in Baltimore where you have two runners that defenses have to account for, one of which is the quarterback. And that's going to open things up for both of them. And in turn, open things up again for the rest of this offense, which does include A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So my plus factor is Saquon Barkley, and then the matchup that I think matters is A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. If the Eagles are going to insist on running these guys, which I guess it still does make sense, Giants corners played well against Cincinnati. So they have a 65.7 PFF grade, Giants do, their corners in particular, and that ranks 15th. So again, middle of the pack, but we've seen some good performances out of them, and I have to think in a division matchup, they're going to show up as well. So Devontae Smith, really, really, really reliable, has not had a drop. And A.J. Brown, he's so good at those contested catches. He's got 3 of them already this season, 2 receiving touchdowns. Both of these guys have those. So give Giants defense, which is the strength of their team, all that they can handle. Overwhelm them between Saquon Barkley and these two guys, and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. That's really hard if this offense is firing on all cylinders to contend with.
My plus factor in this, to round things out here for this game, is simply Jalen Hurts, because I talked about what he could be more in the run game with this team as an added option there with his legs, but really it's him as a passer. Now, I understand his top 2 receivers has missed some time, and that's going to go into these statistics, but career low big time throw percentage this year, career high turnover worthy play percentage. No matter how you slice it, that's not the direction that you want to be going in those things. And so for Hurts, it just needs to be a lot better. It feels like he has been struggling to get back to form of that 2020 postseason and Super Bowl run. And this year it feels like he's even worse than he was the previous season. So now you got these guys back. You got some better health along the offensive line as well with Lane Johnson. You obviously have a stable running back to hand the ball off to. Let's see some steadiness. Let's see some efficiency, even if it's not lighting the world on fire. Let's have a turnover-worthy play-free game here from Jalen Hurts. Let's have a couple of nice first down scrambles, big-time throw or two. Let's just get back to efficient football. And I think that that's what the Eagles really need to sort of stabilize what feels like an unstable situation here with them. Hurts, I think, has unfortunately been a factor there, but I think he can remedy that with these two guys at receiver back. So let's trend in the right direction there. Like I said, let's have a turnover-worthy free football game. And I think that he can be that plus factor to get the Eagles a victory if he is able to do that. Las Vegas Raiders at the Los Angeles Rams here. Matchup that matters, Carmen. Devontae Adams. Whoop, sorry. Nope, just kidding. All right, who do you have in this game?
It's Max Crosby versus Rob Havenstein. It's like that. That's the most effective part of this Raiders team is Max Crosby in particular. Kevin Dotson at right guard for the Los Angeles Rams has to help Havenstein out because incredibly, Max Crosby has the second most unblocked pressures of any edge rusher with 5. So just don't forget about Max Crosby and you should be okay. I was kind of shocked seeing that stat because I'm just like, how do you not account for him? How does he get away unblocked? And so you're going to have to work together. You're going to have to work in tandem if you're this Los Angeles Rams offensive line. And that is going to fall primarily given that, Max Crosby stays on the left side of the formation most of the time. So that's going to fall on the right tackle and the right guard for the Rams. And, if they can keep Matthew Stafford clean, which as an aging quarterback you want to do. He hasn't been bad against pressure this season, but I mean, at the end of the day, he's still old and you don't want to get him hit.
That's true. I mean, even if you're young, you don't want to get hit. We see that.
Right.
But look, okay, I think I'll switch over to the other side of things. I'll talk about the Rams defensive line versus the Raiders offensive line. Raiders offensive line, 13th in the NFL in pass blocking grade, 72.5 overall as a team. Not bad, not terrible, but they're going up against a young defensive line that is playing on fire right now. I mean, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Jared Verse, and Braden Fisk, all of them have pass rush grades above 70 over the last 3 weeks. I mean, they are really coming into their own as a group. Over the last 4 weeks in particular, 70.9 run defense grade as a defensive line, 74.9 pass rush grade collectively, and a 76.9 defensive line grade overall. This team is playing really well, and I don't think that was expected with this many young guys. I thought it was going to take a little bit of time, but Byron Young over the last, I think, 3 or 4 weeks has a 20% pressure percentage. Jared Verse has a 33.3 pass rush win percentage. I mean, these guys are really getting after the football. And Braden Fisk as well, I think over the last 2 or 3 weeks has a pass rush grade 81.4 above 81, which is really strong for, again, a guy just getting into the NFL as his first 6 weeks into the league. So for me, this Raiders offensive line has been, I don't know if I want to say a strength of their team, but not terrible. Rams have the opportunity to make that a really tough day for them if they can mitigate what was maybe the few not terrible parts of their team that we have seen over the last couple of weeks. So this young, fiery 4-horseman defensive line here for the Los Angeles Rams has been playing on fire, and I think that how they deal with the Raiders can be a big statistic into who ends up winning this game. What about the plus factor for you?
I mean, if Max Crosby is the best thing that the Raiders have going for him, he's 1A, 1B has to be Brock Bowers, who has been everything you wanted out of a rookie tight end and more. He leads tight ends, in fact, in so many metrics. 85.2 PFF grade, that's first. 384 receiving yards, that's first among tight ends. 211 receiving yards after the catch, first among tight ends. 17 catches gaining a first down, first among tight ends. Let me know if you see a pattern here. 7 contested catches even. That's tied for first with George Kittle. 5 catches gaining 20 or more yards. That's tied for first with Cole Kmet and Dallas Goedert. So he is not playing at all like a rookie. And with the departure now of Devontae Adams, I have to imagine that he is going to be, not that he wasn't before, but he is going to be the go-to guy. And the opposing defenses now are going to pay that much more attention to Brock Bowers. So how effective can he be with all of the attention on him, and the quarterback getting the ball to him in the first place? But like you said, the offensive line is playing decently well. And there should be opportunities for that. But I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that you see a tight end double covered for in Las Vegas, or in LA, I should say, given that this game is taking place there. But yeah, I think that Brock Bowers, if he can still be effective with all the attention on him, is going to be really interesting.
It's so funny because we have these conversations about Brock Bowers and how high you take a tight end, and having to really parse that with how much rookies get paid no matter what, wherever they get drafted. Because people were like, okay, well, if you draft him in the top 5, like, he better produce like a top 5 tight end pretty quickly, because he's going to have the guaranteed money like that, because of the rookie wage scale. Well, he gets drafted number 13 overall, and he has the 12th most fully guaranteed dollars for a tight end in the NFL because of that rookie contract as the 13th overall draft pick.
You need to value tight ends a little bit more.
What'd you say?
We need to value tight ends a little bit more.
Well, I mean, it's so funny because even if Brock Bowers would have been picked in the top 5, he would have been worth his contract right now. If there was a world where, I know there's a lot of factors here, but like, let's say there's a world where the Raiders were picking 4th overall and they still picked Brock Bowers. If this plays out exactly like that, he would still be worth the contract. Like, he would still be worth the guarantees that you would get for being picked number 4 because of all the statistics that you mentioned. It's just unbelievable. My plus factor in this game, Cooper Kupp returning. They were getting Cooper Kupp back in this game. And if we do, obviously that's a huge plus factor. Even in the 2 games that Cooper Kupp played in, 38.9 threat percentage this season. I mean, Matthew Stafford is just very clearly going to build the entire passing offense through Cooper Kupp if he is out there, even if he is not 100%. So to me, he has to be the plus factor if he is going to be healthy enough to go in this one. Panthers Commanders. Next game I want to get to, next 4 o'clock game here. Interesting matchup. Commanders, coming off of a tough game against the Baltimore Ravens, a little bounce back game here, obviously, against the Panthers. But there's reason to believe that the Panthers might make this bad boy a little more competitive than you think. Matchup that matters here, Carmen. What do we got?
Yeah, I've got strength on strength. You got J.C. Horn against scary Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin has been wonderful for Jaden Daniels, and who has now, started to push the ball down the field a little bit more. Terry McLaurin only has 5 explosive plays on the season, which kind of makes sense given that starting the season out, I think Cliff Kingsbury was very good about easing Jaden Daniels into the pro game, trying to mesh both the college and the pro game together. Didn't really ask Jaden Daniels to push the ball down the field, but now he's starting. And Terry McLaurin, despite having only 5 explosive plays, has 368 receiving yards, which ranks 20th. He's got 19 first downs. That's tied for 10th. And he's the 10th. He's ranked 10th in passer rating when targeted. So Jaden Daniels has 114.6 passer rating when he targets Terry McLaurin. On the other side, you've got J.C. Horn, though, who's allowing just a 43.8 completion percentage. And that ranks as the 4th lowest among corners right now. He's allowed just 159 receiving yards so far. That ranks 9th. 6th best forced incompletion percentage, but he has allowed 3 touchdowns. So he's not giving up a lot, but you still can score on him, I guess. Terry McLaurin is going to go a long way, and that matchup in particular, I think, is going to be very interesting to watch and see who gets the best of it.
He's my plus factor in this one, so I knew we'd probably be talking about J.C. Horn quite a bit. 72.5 coverage grade against the Falcons last week. That was his season high as well. So you highlighted some of the good numbers for him. I think that J.C. Horn's also a plus factor in this one because as the trade deadline looms and the Panthers aren't very good, is J.C. Horn one of the guys that they would consider moving? Now, you might think that's crazy. Why would they get rid of one of the most talented players that they have on the defense? Well, they already did move on from Brian Burns because they realized that they weren't exactly going to be in a winning window with Brian Burns there, and being able to trade him and not have to pay him for years that weren't good. Maybe they think the same about J.C. Horn because he's kind of coming up to, what is this, the 4th year of his rookie contract or the 3rd year of his rookie contract? He's coming up towards the second half or the end of his rookie contract. So you got to factor in the fact that, okay, he's been hurt as well. Like if some team's going to give you a first round pick for JC Horn, and you got to consider that, even with where the Panthers are. Like, even with I think there's obviously two ways that you could look at it. You could say, oh, well, they don't have anybody else. Why would they ever trade him? But then you got to look at the fact that they probably in line for another top 3 pick this year. So is JC really going to be a part of whatever the next winning window is for you? Because you figure that's probably 2 3 years away anyways. He's well into a second contract at that point. He's already missed time due to injury, a lot of time due to injury. Just something to think about. So how he plays against Terry McLaurin could potentially sway whether he actually is on the trade block when the trade deadline actually comes around. So I think that's something to monitor as well. Matchup that matters for me in this one is the Commanders coverage versus the Panthers passing game specifically. When you look at the Commanders they were really bad. I think were they dead last? They were either dead last or second to last in the NFL through the first 4 weeks of the season in team coverage grade. Then in week 5, they played the Browns, if I remember correctly. They had a 70.1 coverage grade as a team. So you go, all right, we can work with this. Then in week 6, the following week, it was back low. It was a 41.1 coverage grade as a team against the Baltimore Ravens. So this remains a group that you can really attack in coverage. When you look at the Panthers, in week 3, they had a 75.3 passing grade. In week 4, they had a 79.3 passing grade against the Raiders first and then the Bengals. But then over these last 2 weeks, weeks 5 and week 6, it's recalibrated a little bit. It's been passing games in the 50s. So who's going to show up here, right? Is it going to be the version of the Panthers passing attack that we saw against the Raiders or the Bengals, against a bad coverage group for the Commanders? Or it's going to be the other side of the coin. Well, the Commander is going to say, no, we're actually trending in the right direction. We're going to shut them down. We're going to make it, business as usual here for the Panthers offense, the way that we've seen it over the last couple of weeks. So to me, that's a huge matchup that matters because this has been units on both sides of the ball that have struggled. Which one either struggles more or is able to not struggle as much, however you want to look at it, whether you're glass half full or glass half empty, probably depends on who you're rooting for in this one. What's your plus factor here, Carmen?
I think you and I have traded off having the same plus factor when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, and it's Chuba Hubbard. Because you got to do it. You got to do it. And I do think that there is an opportunity this week against a Commander's run defense that it just hasn't really been great. 60.1 grade and run defense grade for Washington, which ranks 20th in the league. 29 rushes, allowing 10 or more yards, which is the most of any team in the league right now. So that should present an opportunity for Chuba Hubbard, who hasn't really gotten those explosive runs. He has the 6th fewest rushes, gaining 10 or more yards. So, what's, again, going to win out? And can Chuba Hubbard win out and get this Carolina offense going a little bit more, open it up a little bit more, put this Washington defense on their heels a little bit, who I'm, just not completely sold on yet. And it does present an opportunity because the offense is doing really well in Washington. Jaden Daniels is in full command of this offense. He understands it. He is very, very comfortable in it. And they're going to score points. And we've seen that going toe-to-toe with the Ravens, who are, quite frankly, one of the best teams in the league. How are you going to keep up with that? How are you going to control the ball? How are you going to control the time of possession, all of that kind of stuff, sustain drives? And the answer is Chuba Hubbard if you're the Carolina Panthers.
I would agree. Another game that is worthy of a primetime slot, but is not on a primetime slot, is Chiefs-Niners here. This is obviously a massive matchup for a lot of reasons. One being the fact that it is a Super Bowl rematch here that we have in the regular season. And it'll be a good barometer, right? I know the Chiefs are sitting here, they're undefeated, but it hasn't looked like they have played a really great brand of football. And the Niners, coming off of a couple of losses this year, they would love to turn this game into a win and really slingshot what they could be over the next month specifically. Matchup that matters here, Carmen. What do we got?
This is like the most general of general matchups, but it's Patrick Mahomes versus the 49ers. Given the history that Patrick Mahomes has against this team, not only in the Super Bowl, but in the regular season as well, he has never lost to the San Francisco 49ers. 79.0 PFF grade against the 49ers. 109 completions on 160 attempts versus the 49ers. 1,356 passing yards, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Again, this is coming in The 4 games, including 2 Super Bowls. Patrick Mahomes knows what to do against the 49ers. He's very good against the 49ers. And then on top of Patrick Mahomes in particular, Steve Spagnuolo against the 49ers is very, very good. The Chiefs ranked 9th in EPA per play allowed against the run when they play the 49ers, and San Francisco runs 21 personnel at the highest clip in the league. That's 41% of the time, 41.7% of the time to be exact. So that is something that Steve Spagnuolo's defenses are very, very good at. And it's something that the 49ers do a whole lot. Also, the 49ers average just 21.7 points per game when playing the Chiefs. So because of Steve Spagnuolo and what he is able to do. So with the combination of Patrick Mahomes and Steve Spagnuolo against the 49ers in particular, it just skews the Chiefs' way, and it's not coincidence that Patrick Mahomes has never lost to this team. So that's kind of the matchup that matters. Can the 49ers break that streak?
Yeah, normally I don't really care about this player, this team versus this team statistics,
Right.
Going back to 1960 or whatever. It's like, okay, well, that part I don't really care about, but I think there is merit to how Mahomes has played against the 49ers specifically because a lot of those core players are still there. You've had coordinator changes, but I think a lot of the philosophies are the same as well. So I do think how well Mahomes knows this 49ers defense is something that is worth noting. So I do certainly agree with you there. I think the Chiefs run game is a big deal, right? The Chiefs run game versus the Niners run defense. We've talked a couple of times here throughout the year. The Niners run defense is just not as good of a unit. I think we think that this is a feared defensive front. It's a good defensive front, but 55.1 run defense grade as a team that's 24th in the NFL. They're 20th in EPA per rush allowed. So they're allowing teams to move the ball pretty well against them on the ground. I think you saw in that Arizona Cardinals game, the big reason why the Cardinals were able to come back and win was because they were able to hand the ball off to James Conner as the game was going on and still get a lot of success, get those yards after contact, and get those first downs. When you look at the Chiefs on the other side of things, 41 carries in week 5, which remember they had a bye week last week. So this is the last game that we saw. 41 carries in week 5 was their most of the season, despite not having Isaiah Pacheco. They're not afraid to hand the ball off to newcomer / old familiar face, however you want to say it. It's Kareem Hunt. They gave Kareem Hunt 27 carries in week 5. They had no reservations about giving this guy the football. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to be afraid to run the ball if the 49ers cannot defend it. And I think that's an important part of the Chiefs staying pretty balanced in this game. And then my plus factor in this one, I'll talk about Juju Smith-Schuster because he had 130 yards on, I believe it was 7 catches for the Kansas City Chiefs. So yeah, 7 catches on 8 targets. I mean, he was a massive part of their game plan, and he was part of what they went with to try to make up for Rashee Rice no longer being in the lineup. Now, to me, not only is Juju Smith-Schuster sort of a plus factor there to see if he could sort of replicate his success in week 5, but also, again, getting back to the trade deadline, if Juju Smith-Schuster or this passing attack overall cannot look up to par, do the Chiefs really start to get more aggressive for a player in the trading market? There were rumors that they were interested with Devontae Adams. There's been talk of them potentially a landing spot for.
Devontae shut that down on Kay Adams' show.
Okay, so
this morning he said the Chiefs were not on the list. They were not. That was never going to happen, which is very, very interesting.
For him specifically, or the Chiefs weren't interested?
It was he was talking about his list.
Okay, so it was his list.
But it was his list that matched up with the Raiders.
Okay.
So it was he presented a list to the GM in Las Vegas and said, these are the teams I want to go to. And then he was given all right, yeah, this is our list, or this is where this matches up. And the Chiefs were not on that list.
Well, they never traded to because it's an in-division opponent, and that would make it just way worse. But I do think that they would still potentially be in for a Mike Williams, maybe a DeAndre Hopkins, right? And so I think how the wide receivers play in this game, maybe specifically Juju Smith-Schuster, could go a long way into how much of buyers they might be at the deadline for a wide receiver. But he's a plus factor overall just because they need to move the ball on offense. What's your plus factor in this one?
My plus factor is Brock Purdy because he hasn't really had the opportunities against the Chiefs to really show who he is. And we know now That he's for real. It's not just because he has all these wonderful weapons and he has Kyle Shanahan as his offensive play caller. Brock Purdy is a good quarterback, and there are some really fun stats that prove that so far this season. He has an 88.2 PFF grade, which ranks second among quarterbacks. 10 or more yard throws. He's 52 of 83, 1,114 yards, which is 288 yards more than any other quarterback. 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Third and fourth down in particular, this is the fun one, 31 of 53, 347 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. Brock Purdy is not only a good quarterback, Brock Purdy has the clutch gene, and he is producing on third and fourth down. So not only is he continuing drives on third and fourth downs, he is actually scoring on third and fourth downs. That's incredible. That's an incredible rate. And I'm really, really happy for Brock Purdy because, again, there's been so much discourse about, is he actually a good quarterback or is he just the beneficiary of the team around him? And we've seen him without quite a few of his weapons. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is missing from this offense, and Brock Purdy is still playing out of his mind. So now he gets to go up against the Chiefs. And in this rivalry, that's become a rivalry because of all of the success of both of these teams, who, is he going to, again, show up, elevate the 49ers? Can he break this streak that they're on? I think he is the single most important player to doing that. And it'll be really interesting to see. I'm really excited for Brock Purdy.
As a Brock Purdy skeptic for basically his entire time in the NFL, it brings me no joy to say that he is a legit MVP candidate. He really is. I mean, his numbers and his play this year have been fantastic. And in all seriousness, he is playing unbelievable. And it's at a way where yes, of course, he plays on a really good football team. Yes, he has a good offensive coordinator calling plays for him, but he is doing things this season where it's like, okay, it's also him. Like, they're not just I was talking with Arif Hassan, who writes for the Y Left Substack, and Arif was like, it feels like 2015 Peyton Manning, where Manning's arm was a little shot. Because, like, I don't think Brock Purdy has a great arm. There were 2 throws in particular last week where I watched Purdy get rid of it, and I was like, that's going to be picked off by 8 different people by the time it gets to the catch point. And it wasn't. And it just happened to get to the catch point right before the safety or the cornerback could even get there. And it's like, that was Manning. Manning's arm was in 2015. Manning's arm was not.
He has a sense for timing. He's got a sense.
The anticipation is unbelievable for him right now. And
I say all that, everything so well.
100%. And I say all that to give Brock Purdy all the credit that he deserves this season. This is the best he has looked, I think, in his NFL career. Maybe some of the numbers maybe aren't as good, but he is doing more, like, individually, and why I think that he is such a catalyst and somebody that you got to talk about for early MVP conversations, because he's been awesome. He's been awesome. Before we get to the 3 primetime games, we got a Sunday Night Football and 2 Monday Night Footballs. This podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Cherry Bundy, the performance drink that is fueling the Healthlete revolution. Natural products, natural ingredients, no added sugar. The tart cherries in the mix. It's the highest antioxidant fruit and vegetable that you can find in the world. It's got so many great benefits: anti-inflammatory, it'll reduce soreness, increase recovery, helps with sleep, helps immunity. If you live an active lifestyle at all whatsoever, even if you love just getting a brisk walk in the morning or at night, whatever it is, this will always help you feel your best. It's used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, every team in the NFL, 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions, every single NCAA and football national champion since 2007 has been using this product. So it is obviously tested, tried, and true. The products are available on Amazon and cherrybunny.com, retailers nationwide as well, including like Publix, Kroger, things like that. So go check it out, see if it's available locally, but if not, you can check them out on Amazon and cherrybunny.com as well. They've got great products when it comes to sleep, recovery. They got a protein drink as well. Check them all out, cherrybunny.com. New York Jets, Pittsburgh Steelers. No shortage of headlines going into this one for Sunday Night Football. You've got the Pittsburgh Steelers making a change at quarterback, going with Russell Wilson. You got the New York Jets. Now Devontae Adams is miraculously healed from his hamstring as well. What just
incredible how that works. My God, he's a medical marvel.
It's Christmas miracle. Okay, so what's the matchup that matters in this one? What are we going with here?
Well, it's the unit that is going to allow Aaron Rodgers to get the ball to Devontae Adams or the like, and it's the Jets offensive line versus this Pittsburgh defensive line, which is obviously the strength of its team. The Jets O line has been holding up for, the 40-year-old quarterback, 74.3 PFF grade, which ranks ninth in the league. Pass blocking grade, not as great, 16th, but they are 10th in run blocking grade. So again, I would like to see the Jets run the ball a little bit more as well. But Steelers leaders in pressures, Cam Hayward, 35-year-old Cam Hayward, 22 pressures, TJ Watt at 15. That's incredible. Getting this much production out of Cam Hayward. Again, I say it all the time because I'm at the age that these guys are at when they are considered ancient and old and, basically like just zombies on the field. And yet Cam Hayward is bucking everything that we think of when we think of a 35-year-old defensive lineman. So really excited to see what that looks like against this Jets offensive line. Weirdly enough, TJ Watt, really good against the run this year. 93.9 run defense grade, which is first among defensive players. That is, so what he's kind of, I guess, lacking when you talk about him only having 15 pressures this year, he's making up for the fact that he is a multi-dimensional defender and
Yes.
he's being really good against the run. And I do think that the Jets, again, I want to see them run the ball more. I want to see them run Breece Hall more. And it hasn't really happened. And I don't know if that's going to happen against this Pittsburgh defensive front, especially. So we're going to see.
Yeah, I'll get a little bit more micro with that because I agree. I think the Jets' offensive line versus Pittsburgh's defensive line is a key in this one. But I'll say the run game specifically. You mentioned TJ Watt and what he has been against the run. He's been unbelievable, especially with the forced fumbles as well. When you look at the Jets last week, I know it wasn't a loss, but they ran the ball better than they have at any point in time. 125 rushing yards from Breece Hall. 66 of those yards came after contact. I think that might have been just for the team in general, but that was a season high, wasn't even close for this team. So the offensive line was blocking better, the run game was better, and I think things looked more balanced for the Jets offense there because of it. They need to continue having that script, or at least it cannot be as bad in the run game as it has been in weeks prior. Steelers run defense grade 79.1 as a team. That's third highest in the NFL. You mentioned Cam Hayward and TJ Watt as two of the big reasons why. TJ Watt gets love for Defensive Player of the Year, which he absolutely should. I want to be very clear. Cam Hayward also, in my opinion, the Steelers have two of the top three candidates for Defensive Player of the Year. Hutchinson, I think, was clear in a way number one, but now it opens up a lot more. And those two guys absolutely have to be at the very top of the conversation. If they are able to bring the Jets run game back to what it was in weeks, 3, 4, 5, where, man, they are not running the ball at all whatsoever. Even with Devontae Adams on the team, it's hard to think that the Jets could have a ton of offensive success. Now, I don't know how much offensive success they'll need with Russell Wilson in there. Maybe that'll be a little bit of a struggle as well, but I think that that's something worth noting anyways. What's your plus factor in this game?
Shocker of shockers, it's Devontae Adams.
Again, somebody had to talk about it here.
We had to talk about it. And I do think that, like you said, his hamstring is magically fine. I used the GIF this week of the women's soccer player who scores a goal, fakes getting a hamstring injury, and then just does her little dance right after. And I'm like, that's Devontae Adams going for his physical in New York. And we've seen how willing Aaron Rodgers is, or how much he wants to throw to familiar targets. This last game against the Buffalo Bills, he did target Garrett Wilson 10 times. Garrett Wilson connected with him on 8 of those for 107 yards, and that was really great to see. But he was bested in yardage in this Buffalo game by Allen Lazard, who has been with Aaron Rodgers for a very long time. He caught the Hail Mary. He caught that impossible throw that Aaron Rodgers threw, I believe it was Terrell Bernard's elbow, or the crook of his armpit. There's tight window throws, and then there's whatever that was. And that Allen Lazard was the beneficiary of that as well. So we know that Aaron Rodgers is going to try to force the ball to familiar targets. There is no one more familiar to Aaron Rodgers right now than Devontae Adams, despite not having played with him for the last couple of years. These two, they've dropped in on each other's interviews. They are clearly happy to be with each other. Devontae Adams is staying with Aaron Rodgers while he gets a place in New Jersey, New York. I don't think, again, that any of Devontae's stats up until this point matters. He only has one receiving touchdown on the season, but that's not going to matter now that he's back with his boy. That was his number one destination. The Jets were clearly wanting to bring him in, and that was, he's there to save the Jets season, whether or not he wants to take on that responsibility. Him and Aaron Rodgers are going to have to save the season, and it's going to have to start this week.
The trade was worth it for vibes alone. I'm going to be honest with you. Just vibes alone, I think the trade was worth it. My plus factor in this one is the Jets on third down. I've been on this show and on the review show saying that if the Jets had Davante Adams, I think they would be 2-0 over the last 2 weeks. I know fans of the teams that they didn't beat don't like to hear that, but I really do, and I think that the third down percentage is a big reason why. Right now, the Jets 40th on third and fourth down conversion is 20th in the NFL. I think that number jumps up with Davante Adams there. Steelers defense, they rank 12th in the NFL at third and fourth down conversions allowed. So the Jets certainly have to be better against a defense that knows how to defend it. And red zone TD efficiency as well. Jets 16th in the NFL. You would think that number would be higher with Aaron Rodgers. I think that number also goes up with Davante Adams there. And they're going up once again, a stout defense in that area. Steelers 4th in the NFL in red zone touchdown percentage allowed. So this is and I mean that like as a compliment, not like the fourth most, the fourth least. So Steelers defense, really good, shocker. And I think the Jets are certainly going to get better play out of their wide receivers in the money areas of third down and in the red zone with the addition of Davante Adams. Let's go to the Monday Night Football games. The first of two Monday Night Football double headers. It's the Ravens traveling to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Carmen, you were wearing the Buccaneers hoodie. What do you got in this one?
I think you have to go with the most obvious, which is this Ravens rushing offense against this Bucs run defense. Now, Todd Bowles' calling card has always been to stop the run first. If you look at the turnaround from the team when he first got there in 2019, that was the very first thing he addressed. That unit, while it was not the best defense in the league at that point, did improve to be the number one overall run defense that season. That has carried through for the most part in all of Todd Bowles' tenure. This season in particular, it has been lacking. They are 24th in rushing yards per play average, which is very uncharacteristic, but you also have to consider that they've had a lot of injuries. So you didn't have Kalijah Kancey until this last week, who's a huge space eater up front. You did have Vita Vea back, but he did miss a few games. You also got Antoine Winfield Jr. back this last game. That has paid dividends against the run. And now that you have all of those guys on the field together, I have to imagine that this run defense is going to get back to what we're used to seeing from a Todd Bowles defense. That's going to be really hard, though, against this Ravens rushing attack, which is the best in the league by far. Again, we talk so much about Derrick Henry, but you've got the added factor that Lamar Jackson is also a major part of this run game. And he's also the quarterback, and he's passing just incredibly. I mean, if you're talking about MVP candidate in general, Lamar looks like he's going for a repeat. He already has over 1,500 passing yards, not just rushing yards. He is throwing the ball. He is diagnosing things. He's reading defenses better than anyone right now. And it's an incredible feat because of how much of a threat he still is in the run game, coupled with Derrick Henry. Teams are just not equipped to handle those guys. So the Bucs are going to have to be really good against the run. They're going to also have to be just specifically very sound as far as their tackling goes. The Ravens rank first in forced missed tackles in the run game. The Bucs rank 19th in missed tackles versus the run. So that's going to have to get better. And again, I think it will now that you have Antoine Winfield Jr. back on the field, now that you have Kalijah Kancey back on the field on that front. But that's what this is going to come down to for me, is how well the Bucs defense can contend with this Ravens rushing attack.
No, I think that obviously that's a great call out, and every way that you talk about the Baltimore Ravens has to be stemmed around what they're going to be in the run game. Because if this team is going to be imposing their will in the run game, there's not much you could do. They're one of the top 3 teams in the NFL right now for a reason, and it is certainly because how they are able to play their game every single week. And and that includes like how they run the ball, which is, if you can dominate running the ball, things get a lot easier for you. So I'll go to a different side. I'll give a nod to Josh Capo for this, because he was texting me, and he started off the text by saying, hey, do you want an interesting stat? And I was like, yeah, always, because Josh is
Obviously.
always fantastic at it. Josh got really good stats. You guys should go follow him on Twitter and all his great work at Pewter Report. But he's like, I have a stat that could be evidence to Mike Evans not getting 1,000 yards this season. I said, okay, well, now I'm
No, I don't
blocking.
want that
I was going to
stat.
say,
What?
now not only do I not want the stat, but I'm blocking your number. But he did point something out, and he said that Evans is still getting somewhat similar volume, but the average depth of target is lower. So the catches that he's making, he just has less of those explosive catches. And when I went and I did a little bit more research on it, he's right. But he's not just right for Mike Evans. Mike Evans' average depth of target this year is 12.5. That'd be a career low for him. Chris Godwin is also 5.7. That's a career low for Chris Godwin. So they're just not passing it deep with regularity the way they have with these two guys in the past. Now, the reason I bring that up as a matchup that matters is because the Ravens specifically on passes of 10 or more yards this season, 29.0 coverage grade, which is 27th in the NFL, most receptions allowed of 10 or more yards at 42. They have the second most incompletions, but this is still, forced incompletions, but this is still a secondary that has been susceptible to giving up big passes. So do the Bucs see that as a weakness from this team and say to themselves, all right, let's dial it up a little bit more. Let's attempt some of those deeper passes. It's not get away from our identity, but let's, push it down the field a little bit more because we think we're going to be able to. They know these receivers can do it. They've done it before many times in their career. Now it's just about upping that against certain opponents. And I think the Ravens are one of them to do it. So Josh, we're getting Mike Evans those 1,000 yards. We're going to do it.
Are.
And it's starting this weekend. So I don't know. We'll see. Well,
I so much enjoy how much responsibility quarterbacks take for that for Mike, because I just remember when Mike had missed some time and Tom Brady was the quarterback in Tampa. He was really, forcing the ball in those last couple of games to Mike Evans to make sure he got 1,000 yards. And I think Baker feels equally responsible for getting Mike his 1,000 yards. And then, everything else is gravy, but just get Mike to that number and how much the team works together to make sure it happens. It's very heartwarming.
Plus factor in this one. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm gonna just kind of go with what you were talking about initially, or just there was, can the Bucs push the ball down the field a little bit more because of the fact that they're going to have to outscore the Ravens? I think that when you talk about this Ravens rushing attack and how outmatched pretty much every defense is for it, the way to remedy that is to just score more points than them. And the Bucs are averaging more points than the Ravens. Are averaging 29.7 points per game, which is tied for second most in the league. But the Ravens are averaging 29.5 points per game. So it's a literal differential of 0.2 points, which isn't real because we don't actually use fractions when you look at the final score. I think Tampa needs to be better on third down in particular, even though they already rank fourth. But this is the margin of error we're talking. They need to be even better than fourth in the league on third down. They need to be even better in the red zone where they're currently ranked in the top 10. And for the love of God, do not turn the ball over. That is the main thing. I think all of this is to say that my plus factor is essentially Baker Mayfield. And can he take care of the football? Can he push the ball down the field? Can he outscore the Ravens and be smart about it? We've seen turnovers just kind of come, or takeaways from this Bucs offense come in chunks. It's 3 interceptions against the New Orleans Saints, which doesn't matter because they blew him out of the water anyway. And before that, I believe he got his other 2 interceptions on the season in the same game. So either Baker's completely clean or he turns the ball over multiple times. We cannot have a turn the ball over multiple times game against the Ravens.
Right. Yeah. They will make you pay. There's no doubt about it. So I think that how they fare running the ball also means a lot. Obviously, Sean Tucker and how he was able to run the ball last week with no Rashad White. That was fantastic to see. If you're a Bucs fan, that is, not if you're a Saints fan. Bucky Irving obviously is a viable option for them as well. There's talk of sort of a 3-headed rushing attack now moving forward because of how well Sean Tucker ran the ball last week. But I just think in particular, the X factor, the plus factor is the Bucs being able to continuing their success on the ground. Last year, 3.4 yards per carry average for this team. This year, it's a 5.3. I mean, that is a world of difference when you have that sort of change. Now, the offensive line's blocking better for them, and I think another shout-out could be how good this Ravens defensive line is. When we were doing our In the Trenches defensive line rankings on the Tuesday episode of the NFL podcast, myself and Ollie Conley, we both had the Ravens as the second best defensive line in the NFL. So certainly those guys can come together and really wreak havoc. But again, it kind of comes down to the success is, can the Bucs still run the ball and be a plus factor here for this team against a really good Ravens defensive line? We'll see if that can make the difference. Last game we're talking about here, Chargers at Cardinals. I'll start with my matchup that matters. And my matchup that matters here in this game is sort of, are the Chargers imposters a little bit here with their defense? Because we've come on here before and we've praised, all right, lowest points per game allowed in the NFL. But if you do a little more digging than that, they've had their bye week. So they've only played 5 games. 4 out of the 5 games they've played are offenses that are bottom 12 in the NFL in points per game. So they're kind of feasting off of really bad offenses. So I am curious, now going up against a potent passing attack, or a potential passing attack, I should say, with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals aren't lighting the world on fire with points per game themselves, but the potential of this group, I think, is better than the potential of basically everybody that the Chargers have gone up against outside of the Kansas City Chiefs. What does that look like now? Who shows up? Is this really one of the top 5 defenses in the NFL? Are they really a unit that is going to completely put the clamps on a potentially potent Cardinals offensive attack or not? That, to me, is that matchup that matters. What's the real version of the Chargers defense? I think we get a lot closer to answering that question here this upcoming week.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the other side of things with the Chargers offense and their rushing offense in particular, going against this Arizona rushing defense, which ranks 29th in yards per game given up on the ground. And I think we think of the Chargers as this team under Jim Harbaugh that is a run-first team that is primarily, everything goes through the ground offensively. And that's technically true. They're running the ball 50.3% of the time, which is the highest clip in the league. But what's really concerning to me is they're only 21st in rushing yards per play. They're only averaging 4.18 yards per play on the ground. And that's just not translating into enough production for this offense that is only averaging 18.2 points per game, which is bottom 3rd in the league. So you think of the Chargers as being able to run the ball effectively, but at the same time, they're actually not. It's just they're running the ball at a sheer volume rate that is allowing them to kind of get more yards when it comes to overall totals. I believe they're 10th in rushing yards per game. But what that breaks down to per play, I think, is more telling. And the fact that they rank only 21st. And so they're going to be going against a rushing defense that has been struggling this year. Can you get more of those chunk plays? Can you get that yardage average up on a per play basis? And you're going to have to do it now. I mean, I think, it's basically J.K. Dobbins, but he is healthy. You have a fullback that is very involved in this Jim Harbaugh offense. And then how much they like to run play action with Justin Herbert. This all kind of works in tandem together if you can really be a run-first offense and be effective on early downs with runs, and then you leave it up to Justin Herbert to kind of take the lid off over the top. That's what I want to see from this Chargers offense, and it's not something that we've been seeing on a consistent basis.
I'll go back to the other side of the football for my plus factor. It kind of goes into sort of what I was saying is what version of the Chargers defense are we going to get? I also wonder what version of Kyler Murray we're going to get, because if you look at Kyler Murray through the first 6 weeks of the season, 75.6 PFF grade, then 96.9. I mean, that game, that was against the Rams, I believe. I mean, that's going to go down as probably the highest graded quarterback performance that we have this season. I mean, 96.9 is just ridiculous. And then it's 2 games in the 50s. And then week 5, 73.5. And then last week, back again, 61.1. So which version of Kyler Murray are we going to get in this game? We need some consistency and some finality, if you will. We need to get at least closer to the answers for either the Chargers defense or Kyler Murray and what this Cardinals offense can be, because it seems like the defense might have looked good early on in the season, but they're clearly a year away still on the defensive side of the football. So it's really going to be
saying that with
right. And I mean, I like the picks that they've made. I like the investments they have made, but they're especially up front. I mean, it's not as good as it needs to be to win football games right now. So to me, this whole season is going to be carried by their offense, and we'll get a little bit of a clearer picture of how many wins that could realistically be, depending on how they play here, hosting the Los Angeles Chargers. But what do you got plus factor before we get out of here?
Yeah, it was the same as you. It was Kyler Murray, and which Kyler Murray are you going to get? And if I don't know the status of Marvin Harrison Jr. right now, so is he going to return to the lineup? We're going to see. It's obviously only Thursday, so does he get cleared to come back? That's going to be really interesting. So,
yep, I agree. There we go. All the games previewed, all the matchups talked about, all the plus factors written in. If you want to check out all these premium stats yourself, you could do so over at pff.com by getting yourself a PFF Plus subscription. There's a lot of great stuff on there, not just the premium stats, but if you're a fantasy football person, you can also integrate our tools into your league as well. So you can look at which players that you should optimize your lineup with, or you should add and drop once draft season rolls around. You get the fully unlocked mock draft simulator. You get, of course, the draft guide as well. All the best stuff that we have during draft season, the off season. I think free agency goes into that as well. So you can get all of that by getting a subscription over at pff.com. Appreciate everybody watching and listening to the show. For Trevor Sikkema and Carmen Vitali, thanks guys so much. We will see you same time after week 7 to preview week 8. Same time next week. See you then.